everyone to another video. Now, even though I'm a real-world rated 787 777 Captain, this video, as always, is for entertainment purposes only and not intended for real-world use. And in this video, we are covering the 777 electronic checklist. And to be more precise, we're using the normal checklist case. The abnormal checklist will be covered in a later video. I'm using the PNVG 777 here to demonstrate this. However, this video and this procedure is also valid for the Flight Factor 777 as an example. So the Boeing 777 is equipped with an advanced electronic checklist system which enhances flight crew efficiency, it reduces the potential for human error, and improves situational awareness. The electronic checklist is integrated into the aircraft's display units and is used for all normal, non-normal, and emergency checklists. At the beginning, it does take some time and practice in order to get used to the setup of the checklist system, understand the different colors of the checklist items, and understand things like item override, checklist reset, and so on. In order to access the checklist system, you go to your display select panel and press on the checklist button. Let's first start with the so-called closed loop action items. Closed loop action items continuously monitor the position of a flight deck switch, a lever, or a selector. In a few cases, actual system state, such as flap or landing gear position, is also monitored. When the control is in the required position, the action item color changes to green. Let me show you this right now with the parking brake. On the checklist, you can see that the parking brake set is currently white in color. So if I press the pedals and set the parking brake, you can now see the closed loop action makes sure that the parking brake selection is sensed. And in our case, now that the parking brake is set, it goes to green color, and also that tick mark appears next to the item. The fuel control switches are also part of the closed loop action item list, and so they're right now sensed as being in the cutoff position. Now, the first two items are so-called open loop action items. And open loop action items require the flight crew to manually confirm completion with the CCD. So open loop action items do not monitor control position or system state. Open loop action items look different from closed loop action items. Open loop action items have an open loop indicator, in this case a gray box to the left of the line item. So in order to tick off that open item, you would have to click on the item box. And by doing so, you'll see the line become green and a green tick mark appear. And also then the box, that white box, will jump to the next open item. You would do this obviously for all the checklist items, and once all the items are green, at the bottom you'll see a note appear saying checklist complete. Once that is the case, and you have removed the checklist, bringing up the checklist menu again will automatically select the next logical checklist in line. And this would be, in our case, the before start checklist. You can also jump to the next logical checklist by pressing on the normal button at the bottom left corner. Now, all of this may seem very logical and very simple. However, it's vitally important that pilots stick to these clear procedures and maintain what we call a checklist hygiene. This becomes extremely important when going through some very complex abnormal checklists. Now let's have a look at something called item override. So let's pretend we are pushing back and we actually forgot to read the pre-flight checklist. So let me bring up the pre-flight checklist here. And you can see that, well, we can check off the first two items. However, we cannot manually tick off the parking brake set item. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to set the parking brake, right? So that closed loop item cannot be set to green. And then you cannot select the checklist as being complete. So the only way to solve this little issue is that you select item override. Now doing so highlights the selected item in cyan color, indicating to the crew that the item is kind of a non-standard position, however accepted nonetheless. And then at the end you can get into that checklist complete state. Now let's have a look at another situation where maybe something went wrong with the checklist, or you had to stop something in the middle of the process and now the checklist isn't valid anymore, or you would like to restart the checklist from the beginning. You would just simply click on Checklist Reset. And as the name says, it resets the checklist and lets you start from the beginning of that concerned checklist. Now, not only can you override single items, you can also override the whole checklist. This is rarely used, but it could be helpful if for some reason, let's say you're on cruise flight and you accidentally resetted the normal checklists. And so as per logic, the checklist would start right at the beginning again with the pre-flight checklist. So you could just simply press checklist override until you get to the correct checklist. In this case, the descent checklist. And this concludes the video about the normal checklist use of the 777. And as always, thank you so much for supporting. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, as always, happy landings.